I think there were some financial information that you were going to include in the forum that we did in the PowerPoint that didn't end up getting included because the committee hasn't seen it yet, right?
There was that slide with like a spreadsheet on it that we hadn't reviewed as a committee. I'm not sure.
Was it with the assets?
I can't recall, Allison, I'm sorry.
Well,
So we could.
But my more general question is, I think you've done a great job of putting a shell together, and I'm glad it wasn't me, because I know what it takes to do that, and it's not easy to do. It's tedious work. So it's hard. I mean, I'm sure once we have a fuller draft, more full draft, we'll be able to really go through it and in detail and ask questions. Generally speaking, though, I think it's going to be really important to cite sources. That is, not only sources of data, but also sources of language. If something is a direct quote from another document that someone else has written, we need to cite those sources. That's just good practice. And the only other general thing I would say is that right at the beginning, when we're talking about goals, the goals, and in that chart, and whenever we talk about the goals, that goal number 3 needs to be listed in its entirety, and that. Oh, I'm sorry, it is there. I'm sorry, it is there. The goal of increasing district level student to full-time equivalent staff ratios. Because I think, as you said, ours are probably fine, and I think we need to be clear about that isn't our goal in our recommendation.
Great. Steve?
So I wondered, I'm not sure what procedure you'd like to go forward from here, but as a suggestion, we might proceed somewhat as we did with the articles, looking through the document for things where we have disagreement or stuff that needs to be discussed. I wasn't sure. I do note, by the way, under goal 1 down at the very bottom, this on page 3 of 10, increases possibility for parents to select public elementary school within the district through a potential expansion of the region's existing elementary school choice program, which I know was one of the articles we were talking about. I happen to agree. I mean, I don't know how the committee would like to proceed, but that's at least one way, is to look through these goals and see if there's language that people object to, so that we can come back to them.
So, Steve, I'm really glad you raised that, and I'm going to come to you in just a second, Nancy. I think that what I hope that we can discuss tonight, in addition to making sure people get questions answered about what the report looks like, what goes in there, I hope that we can have a plan for how we're going to continue to work on this. I appreciate the work Allison's done, and I know Andrew's going to be available to help. I'm concerned that drafting such a lengthy report by entire committee, even if we just focus on the things that we're concerned about, is going to be a lengthy process. We may, as a committee, decide that we are okay with that lengthy process. It will impact our overall timeline if we make that decision. We may also decide that it would be better to have a small group work to try to build some of this out. I'm not sure, right? There's different paths I could see us going down, but I think that we as a committee should determine what we would like our next steps to be with this report. Yep. Nancy?
I guess the only other thing I would say, generally speaking, is it's going to be important to, when assertions are made, to reference objective evidence and to include that evidence as appendices.
Do you want to cite anything in specific?
Well, I'm looking at goal 5. It's talking about, I'm sorry, I'm on page 6. Thanks. page 6, and it talks about things such as increases purchasing power, strengthens negotiating position. I mean, what's implicit there is that the merger does that more than our existing governance system could, and that there must be some evidence for that on which those assertions are based. And so I think the evidence needs to be listed in the appendices, footnoted and listed.
So we were talking about the number.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mike, what's your question?
I'm just trying to see where Nancy was.
That is where I was,
Okay,
but I was,
that's what I thought.
I was looking down that list of bullets,
Yeah.
just as an example. I'm looking at it quickly. It's the first time I've had a chance to read it.
Yeah, and I do recognize it's hard to discuss something that we haven't all had a chance to fully digest.
And I would also say that if I'd done the work that Allison did, I'd want to kill all of us for not giving her an award and, singing her a song, because
Thank you.
here we are talking about it, not having read it and giving suggestions. I mean, it's appalling. So, our apologies.
No problem. I'm open to constructive criticism.
Well, and it is important, this is the report of the committee.
Exactly.
It's, as much as I appreciate the work that Allison's done, it's not Allison's report, it's the report of the committee,
Right.
right? So, I see we have Andy raising his hand over in the corner.
Just a quick one that I just, all this, the cost stuff and about savings and everything, I don't see anywhere in any of this where there's a cost of doing this. Like, you're gonna do all these, you're gonna give all this land and everything away, there's gonna be an attorney from every town that's gonna wanna do a title search, a deed, transfer, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen, it seems to me, to make this merger happen, and it's a cost. And it just seems like the cost ought to be in there, either with the savings or separate, or you ought to recognize that this thing is not a $2 proposition, that there's a cost. And I don't know if the 150 covers it all, or you say to each town, hey, look, if you got attorneys, that's your problem, that's not ours, that's yours, The fact that you're gonna give us all your property for $1, we're gonna make you pay to give us all your property for $1. I don't mean to get, just some recognition that there's a cost associated with this process,
No, and what it is.
and what it is, but,
Well, our fees alone.
So I'm
Our
gonna
fees
ask,
alone.
can we please just make sure that we're raising hands and letting everyone have a chance to be recognized? Did you guys want to make that comment? Because I didn't hear what you said. Did you want to make a comment, or are you happy with the?
I was making a joke.
I know, but I understand that it was a lighthearted comment, but if you want it to be, an official comment, then it would be great for us to all know what you said, so. Is there any further discussion right now on the report?
Just that,
Mike?
I'll echo all the comments about all the work, I appreciate it, I just need time to look at it.
Right, and I do want to recognize that the report has been on our agenda for like the last 4 meetings, and this is the last meeting we did talk about some of the headings of stuff that would be in the report, but this is the first time that we are really looking at it in more detail, so I do recognize that. I think I saw another hand, and
I think it's reasonable to pull together a small group of people, 3, to do their best to make the first draft. Second draft, this is the first draft. And I'm not volunteering. But I think that's a way to get going, move it forward.
great, thank you, Ed. Andrew, can you clarify for me that this report needs to be at a complete draft state to be presented to the local boards?
Good question.
Not all of it.
Is that like yes, but?
Well,
The report and the articles, but minus the tape.
but the beginning section, the first 10 pages, really should just be pulling information out from the rest of the report. So that section isn't necessary for the individual boards to be looking at when we present this to them. So I guess the answer that I want to give here is from the fancy heading, which shows on my screen is page 11, onward is what we should have in a format that that is at least I don't want to say a final draft, but is at least a solid draft for the boards to digest.
And just as a follow-up, we would need a similar, even more solid draft that would go to the lawyer before it goes to the AOE. So the lawyer, I asked you this before, the lawyer is not just looking at the articles, the lawyer is looking at the report, including the articles.
Yes. And then the AOE and the state board need that first roughly 10 pages of charts.
Okay, so the
And
first
that
10
should be-
pages are
it should
needed
be
for
a relatively straightforward pulling of information from the remainder of the report. It should be.
Okay. Herb,
Looking at section 76C.
you're in the statute again?
Yep, and it says consideration by local district, school district boards and approved by the State Board of Education. And it says, if the study committee prepares a report, the committee shall transmit the report to the school boards of each school district that participate in the study committee, etc. And then B is transmit that report to the report to the secretary. Now, I suppose you could argue that
Can't be a
the
draft.
final,
Can't be a draft.
I mean, at some point, I think you need to comply with that sub-A, which is you got your report and you finalize it and you're gonna send it, transmit it to the towns. Now, I don't know if we're contemplating that as the meeting, the all boards meeting, or not, but at some point, you gotta do that.
Andrew?
Yeah, I would say that that's the point where we expect that the report and the draft are conceptually what this committee has envisioned, and we would not expect that after that there would be any substantial changes. If there were, we would want to communicate those.
So with that, what you mean, Andrew, is that that report with no substantial changes is what is going to be transmitted to the boards in 2 weeks? I'm just trying to understand what you're saying there.
The goal is to have a firm draft in 2 weeks that we transmit.
Okay.
I would second that is what our current timeline envisions. Nancy?
What's the purpose of showing the report to the local boards? Are we expecting them to take action on it?
So my understanding is that the local boards do not need to take action on the report, but that, as Herb pointed out in statute, that this study committee is required to provide the report to the local boards, and the local boards have an opportunity to comment. I'm still trying to clarify exactly what that means, but I do believe that that means that each board needs to discuss it at a meeting that is an official meeting that has a quorum of its members, and be, have the opportunity to provide feedback to this committee.
And that means they need time to have read it. Really?
Elin?
But my understanding was that at this point, though the boards have no power to do anything about it being submitted to the AOE or changing anything. They can advise something, but they have the advisory committee, and we would be foolish not to
Like a local
listen
school
to them, and we would be foolish not to listen to them, but
Right, technically, the local boards do not have to make a motion to accept the report. This committee is not required to make changes that the local boards suggest. We can all talk about how we would feel about that, and whether we think that's a good idea to ignore, feedback that's provided. But the statute requires that we provide the report to the boards, and that the boards be given an opportunity to provide comments. it's not entirely clear that the boards need to be able to provide those comments prior to the report going for the legal review. So it is possible that some of it could overlap in the timeline, although my opinion is it's always better to get the comments and get the thing done before you start getting it officially reviewed. But that's my understanding of it. Comments? May I remind you that we at a minimum need to figure out where we go from here with this report, what our next steps are.
Before adjourning, you mean?
Certainly before we adjourn tonight.
Okay.
We need to figure out, I mean, I guess I would say that I think that the default is that, unless I hear complaints from the folks sitting on this side of the table, that Allison and Andrew can continue to work on it. I don't know if you feel that it's required that we have other folks who are able to work with you, if that's what's desired, but I would like to have a clear sense from the committee of, are we okay with tasking some people with advancing the report? You know, what level of review and discussion are we all planning to have of this report? So, Herb?
I'm perfectly happy having Allison and Andrew do the report. What's key for me, though, is having the language that we're going to be considering next week in advance, so that we have an opportunity to actually read it and consider it. I'm not faulting you at all. You obviously put it together as soon as you could. I just didn't have an opportunity, time this afternoon to read it, and I would think, I don't know, a couple of days anyway, kind of a minimum, I think, to actually be able to read it and think about it. What's that?
We're gonna raise their
Double
pay.
it.
Well, okay, when do you want
Double Allison's.
I can say
when
that
do you think we should?
Cut Andrews.
the weekly meeting cadence is extremely difficult for getting things. It's just we are currently working at a pace that is not a normal school board pace of accomplishing things. So it is definitely. I hear the pain. It's challenging. I think Steve, did you have your hand up before? If you didn't, it's okay.
No,
I
I'm
have
good.
other hands. Okay, Mike.
So one concern that I have, and I thought I saw it in places in here, but I haven't looked at it carefully, but that it feels like there were places where you recognized that we had already consolidated special ed, for instance,
Transportation and
in
food services.
transportation and whatnot, and there were places where
I have to get that synced. I have to
Wait,
get
hold
it
on.
synced.
Hold on, let's let Mike finish his
right.
comment.
So I
Thank
think we're
you.
on the same page, that we don't count those as new efficiency of the
Yep.
charge. Okay.
Okay, any Andrew?
I was just going to say that if when folks are reviewing this, and we do decide that Alice and I are going to clean this up, if folks do have questions or comments, I think it would be helpful if they were emailed to us, just noting that we probably won't be replying, but we would certainly read them and do our best to incorporate them. I think that would be an efficient way to get folks' input into the process.
But you've got, the comments from tonight will be in the minutes, so you'll have those.
Yes.
Right.
But if you, upon further review, if you see other things that are a concern or question or you think could be clarified, it would be helpful to us if you could just email them to us, and appreciate the fact that we'll incorporate them to the report but not reply in detail to your email.
So I have a couple hands. Maybe I could state that a little bit more action-oriented, which is that I would like to make a specific request of committee members to allocate the time in the next 24 hours, if at all possible, if not 24, 48 hours, to review this report. And if there are specific sections that you have concerns or suggestions about, to provide that input by email. Steve?
So Jen, I recognizing the open meeting law, I don't see why, or perhaps, can it be, can you CC the rest of the committee on your objections? No.
No.
Okay.
With keeping. So because
that
we
way.
cannot, it's very, very important that we do not have any discussion
I understand
that
no
occurs
discussions.
by
Everything's
email.
going that way.
Yes.
That way.
We, I would say that we could potentially, and I'm gonna look at you guys, we could potentially, compile all of the comments that come in, and that could be included in next week's agenda packet, right? So it's literally a matter of Steve emailed these comments, Mike emailed the, whatever, so that then in an open meeting format, we would be able to have that information provided. But it's definitely not okay to CC
That's fine.
and to include the committee on email communications like that.
Yep, thank you.
And I appreciate you clarifying it. I know that we have had other discussions as a committee about what's the possibility of using a Google Doc. And again, I really believe that we cannot use Google Docs because again, we would not be in compliance with open meeting law. And Elin, did you want to say anything more than that?
Yeah, I asked, and always just gets scarier and scarier. Yeah, don't be friends with anybody else on Facebook. On school. And mention the school ever.
Well, do school business.
Ari, did you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
just had a question. So when it comes to the report, the comments that we might make by email should have nothing to do with the articles of agreement because we're voting on those
Separately.
You are voting on those separately, right? Okay, I think I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's
That's
good.
a great point, thank
So
you.
we can skip over that part.
Okay.
Just to recap, we only have 2 articles not yet voted on, and we're inviting legal opinions on. Everything else is,
No, there were
So what
not.
I would say is I actually believe that all of the standard articles as of this evening have been accepted, including an article, so we did accept Article 7 with the expectation that the lawyers will craft that. We will review everything again after that. We also added an article that I'm calling number 15 because that's the next number we've got for the, I wrote it down on here as local input, but it was that community one that we talked about for a long time. We have a number of other proposals for additional articles that we have not discussed and that we can come back to this evening if we have the energy to do so. It sounds to me like we have a next step on the report.
what is that
I'm
next
glad,
step?
I'm glad she heard that. No,
What's
we
the
do.
next step?
Okay, so it sounds to me that the next step,
24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
so the next step
48.
is that I'm asking committee members in the next 24 to 48 hours to read the report, to send comments or concerns by email to Andrew and Allison. Those comments can be included within the next agenda packet so that there is a visibility of what comments were provided. And we will discuss the report again next week. Okay, Kate, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was just, you kind of answered it with the email
Okay.
thing. I was just gonna say, did we ask if anyone else wants to help? Or do we not wanna open that can?
I want it.
I think it might make it simpler
Yeah,
if
that's fine.
Andrew and I do it, because I did mention at the last meeting, if somebody wanted to help, they could volunteer, and no one did, so, which is fine, I mean, that's not a problem, but I'm just
Yeah, I just wanted to
saying,
clarify that was the-
yeah, Andrew and I are deeply steeped in these, so.
Great. Elin?
Is it our responsibility to tell our own town members things like that? Like I should tell Michaela and someone from Moncton should tell Dawn? Like, I'm just
And we should
curious
talk
for.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
when you guys
I
should
would
tell
be
Caleb.
happy this evening to send an email to the committee members who are not present.
Great.
And I will also include Rebecca.
Thank you.
Great.
So I'll just make a note of that.
You won't have to read it.
Are you coming back? Are you coming back? Good.
Michaela. Rebecca.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So I'm going to then close the discussion of the report for tonight. Steve, were you raising your hand?
No,
Were you
we're good.
objecting?
No,
Okay.
carry on.
So somewhere here I have an agenda. So where we are at this point is we addressed agenda item 4, drafting the articles A and B. We tabled item C for the moment around all the other possible articles we might add. We have talked now about drafting the report, which is number 5, I know we do need to have a brief update from the communications working group around that community forum. I guess what I'd like to do is to go through items 6 and 7, and then if we have enough people that we can maintain a quorum, we can come back around to talking about the other possible topics. I do recognize it's after 9 o'clock, and if we don't do it tonight, I don't know when we're gonna do it, so.
Well, I just want
Yeah,
to go on
like-
record stating in the strongest possible terms how upsetting it is that we find ourselves not addressing all of the issues. I mean, I believe, maybe I'm stating it too strongly and maybe people are going to want to stay and do this work, but to have not addressed all of the issues that have been put on the table feels, just feels really bad.
About not doing it tonight, is that your?
Well, I can see the calendar. We do it tonight, we plow on, starting at 9 with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weighty issues. Or we come back next week without the time to do it. I don't, well, just said it.
Mike, I appreciate you voicing that concern. I agree, I think it's very difficult. I think that this is a committee that likes to have lengthy discussions about many issues, and I think that those discussions are beneficial. They help us to come to an understanding. And we also, I think someone said last week that this was last week was our 24th meeting of this committee. And so at this point, I'm not sure how to proceed, because if we decide to invest more time in discussing the articles, then we will not be able to present these in 2 weeks, right? I mean, really, that's where we are. Right now, we have Holly Hall reserved in 2 weeks for a community forum, for hopefully an all boards meeting to be able to share the report and the articles. That allows us to continue more or less on the review cycle that we've defined for a November vote. I think we had some lengthy discussions a couple weeks ago about whether we wanted to change our timeline. We did push out by a few weeks. That allowed more time for discussion of articles. I'm personally wondering if we are going to discuss the articles and probably the report for as much time as we allow ourselves to discuss them. And if we want to allow ourselves that time, then that's great, but we as a committee need to make a decision about that. So, all right, we got 3 hands over. Okay, Nancy?
Well, I just want to say that if we had to move the date of our vote, it would not jeopardize the timeline of implementation or the timeline of tax incentives in any way. And if doing that led to a result that we were happier with and more in tune with as a group, it would be worth it.
Okay, Mike, and then Herb?
Just my one response, Jen, is that there's an implication in that last statement, sorry, it's hard for me to get that out, that the committee has wasted time. And I think that the process this committee has engaged in has not always been easy, but it's been fruitful. And I have often not gotten my way, but it's been good conversations and good discussions. And I don't think it takes time. It takes time to work through these issues.
Great, Herb, what's next?
Yeah, and I'm not under any illusion that the committee is going to seriously consider these other articles. I think that the majority, supermajority of the committee has made themselves pretty clear. I share, though, Mike's frustration that these issues that are important to some members have been, just by the way they've been put on the agenda, passed over. I mean, even these, we were about to get into these articles, and then he passed over them, and now it's 9:15, and we're not going to have time. So I feel a little bit like I did with the alternative governance proposal, which was on the agenda for I think 3 or 4 weeks, kept getting passed over, and then we had a short discussion, and that was it. That was the will of the committee.
I just think that I'm not under any illusion that anything's gonna happen with these articles, but it just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel good.
So Herm, I appreciate you sharing that perspective, and I find that this committee has been having some really great discussions, and that those discussions have helped different committee members to perhaps change the viewpoints that they came into that discussion with. And I feel quite happy with the discussions that we've had and where we've been able to end up on some of the articles that we have spent some time on. I saw Ed and then Elin.
I don't minimize at all the importance of these. It's just that I don't feel that they belong here for us to discuss, that they belong in the future for the board to discuss. And our principal job are the articles in the report at this point.
Great. Elin was next.
And
then
I want
Allison.
to add, I mean, I'm foreseeing the school board is looking very much like this, with not being in total agreement and different people feeling differently about these things, and these discussions continuing past our articles of agreement and whatever happens with Act 46, that these are things we are going to continue to deal with. And I hope that those discussions are as fruitful as I think that these have been. These have been good discussions, and I think partly it's because it's a smaller group, especially when a little bit of engineering into even smaller groups, I think really has helped us.
Great. I saw Allison and Steve.
So if we extend the vote any further beyond November 8th, we will already, the boards of all of these individual school districts will already be engaged in budget discussions and other things that come before boards. And that becomes more and more and more critical as we get closer to town meeting day. And a majority of this committee is going to be involved in that work. And right now we have the time to focus on this. It's not a great amount of time, but we do have the time now to focus on it and to move this forward. And my concern is that we get past November and we lose opportunities to have community forums when we want to be engaging our communities in discussions about the budget. And I'm just not comfortable with moving it beyond November 8th.
Right, Steve.
So, I think that we keep, I'm always amazed that while I understand the idea of discussing stuff like crazy, but if in fact you think we do not have enough time, and I think that I may be in agreement, that the thing to do is to put a motion on the table to move our date from November to March. It's pretty simple. We have, I understand Allison's argument, and it's a good one. What it looks like to me, if I'm understanding our timeline, is that we have this huge push to July 1. After July 1, this committee would not have to meet on a weekly basis because it's going to the lawyers, it's going to the AOE, et cetera, et cetera. So if you back that 4 months back from a March date, you're back into November 1st, because it's tough. We have been, these 5-hour-a-week meetings are tough to get through. I guess I will not at the moment put up that motion, but I'll just say that that's the right thing to do if you think we don't have enough time.
Thanks for the comment, Steve. I see some hands. I do want to be clear that it would be desirable to, if such a decision was going to be made, to entertain that this week. Because at this point, we didn't have a location confirmed for the community forum, so
Sure.
that community forum has not been announced.
Right.
I would hate to announce a community forum and then
have to
cancel
be-
it.
Yep.
I suppose we could have it with a different goal if we didn't have the report ready. But that is, that would be critically impacted
Yep.
if we change the timeline. So, Sarah and then Elin.
put forward a motion with my own family about how long I could do this for. I'm not an elected official, and they were willing to sacrifice me for the month of June so that I could potentially return. I get a babysitter every time I come to a meeting, and I don't want to be doing this until March. I'm throwing that out there. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Elin?
I also think I think the other important thing about voting in November is that it's a presidential election and people are going to come to the polls, and it will be a greater percentage of people voting, and I think that's important.
And I saw another hand on the side of the table. Ed?
I'm just afraid that if we slip the date, we'll still be working at this. We're just extending the time of these long meetings. The world gets bigger instead of smaller as each meeting goes on. The agendas get bigger, not smaller. I don't see any end to it.
Nancy?
I don't think any of us are having much fun. And so, I really don't. And so I don't think that extending the time in order to do a good job is going to prompt us to make the job take longer. Because really, it isn't any fun anymore, if it was at the beginning. And I'm not even sure of that. And I think that even though we're not having fun, and even though we don't always agree, I think we are all committed to doing a good job. And I really don't want us to do, pardon me, half-assed job. So I really think we should give it the time it takes and plan to do it as quickly as possible so that we can stop meeting like this and have more fun.
Allison?
I make a motion that we move our vote to the March town meeting date for the approval of the articles of agreement and the report.
I second.
Seconded by Steve. Herb, you got that? So Allison
March.
moved to
2017.
move to move.
SP, second.
Any discussion?
I think this is a mistake.
Okay, so
Do you
Ed
think passes or fails?
says that he thinks this is a mistake. Any other comment? Any other discussion? Nancy?
I think we should approve the motion, and then when we get things done much quicker than Ed is anticipating, we can make a motion to vote sooner than that. But not quite as soon as November 7th or 8th. And I also would like to add that, just for your information, the Franklin Northeast merger failed, that was being voted on today, failed in all 5 towns.
Ooh.
What about Chittenden South?
A very
I
different
don't-
structure than you guys do.
I haven't seen it yet.
So we have a motion on the floor.
Okay, Ari, did you have a discussion?
I just think, I think that, just like to reiterate the issue here with the issues, which are either we delay the proposal, right? And in the hopes of developing something that is perfect versus present something that is imperfect to the voters or to the powers that be that is less perfect than what we would desire. And it seems like some people are avoiding the, that first option of voting in November because they fear that the hard work that they put into this is not going to reflect that integrity. However, if we push it back to March, you might be delaying the inevitable, which is presenting an imperfect report.
I love your comment, and I'm still trying to decide which way that
Trying to parse it out.
which you don't have to say if you don't want. But okay. Herb.
I actually don't see the issue that we're voting on like that. I think it's not between perfect and imperfect. This issue Mike started this. And what it came, and I shared his frustration. I'm not so sure that anything is going to change, frankly, between November and March. What I was frustrated about is that the committee has chosen to take up matters that they want to deal with and not really give much of an opportunity for other members to discuss articles that they wanted to propose. So you never do it perfect. I'm not under any illusion. And sometimes, you know, it gets down to a crunch and you just gotta slap it together and vote on it. I understand that. So I just had a different perspective of what we're arguing about.
Great. Herm, I appreciate your perspective, and I acknowledge that we have not come to specifically discussing some of those proposed articles. I do want to say that I think this committee has spent a significant amount of time discussing various proposals that are part of those articles and in different ways and in different formats. So I recognize that we haven't come to them yet, and having more time would allow us to do that. And I don't think it's fair to say that we haven't discussed those ideas. Andrew?
I just want to throw in my 2 cents. I mean, this committee has done a lot of really hard work, has had some difficult discussions, made some difficult decisions. It feels to me that we're pretty close to being in a place where, without unanimity, but with a supermajority, we're ready to put forward the vision that we've been talking about for 24 plus meetings. And I hate to lose that opportunity that we have by deciding to push out the vote.
I want to make one other comment before and I see there's a comment, but Sarah, I feel your pain. I'm having the same conversations at my family of when is this thing going to be done and when are we going to see you again?
Yeah, that was personal.
I think, no, but I think that we are all dedicating a lot of time to this effort. I have requested this aggressive weekly meeting schedule because of the work to meet that November meeting date. So it would be my expectation that if that date changes, that the pace of our meetings would likely change. And so whether that influences your opinion about it or not, I think that we cannot sustain this level of effort beyond the month of June. So if we are going to decide to spend more time on it, we're going to have a more reasonable pace of moving through items. And I had a hand over on this side of the table.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so since it's 9:30, shall we vote? So the motion on the table is to move the date of the vote to March 8th. This is moved by Allison, second by Steve. And just to be totally clear, we have at the moment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 committee members in the room, which means that we now need 7 for a 2/3 majority. So, just so everyone knows, that's the count before we do the vote. So all those in favor of the motion to move the date to March 8th, please raise your hand. Okay, so we have 4 in favor. All those opposed? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. So, and 1 abstaining. So the motion does not carry. Which I feel always leaves us kind of in limbo when we have these motions and then they don't pass, and then we don't know where we are, although technically with the motion not passing, where we are is that we are continuing to work towards the November 8th date.
You bet. Should we go to 2 a week?
What do you call
I
it?
already have 2 school board meetings this week.
Or only if they take place
Morning and
early
afternoon.
start.
2 a
Well,
days,
I think Sarah actually was the one who proposed a Saturday all-day lockdown retreat to get through it.
She was just kidding though.
I wasn't.
Only if you can do it at the Essex soccer fields.
Kate?
Do we have any idea of any hours of any meetings that we can discuss what's left on the agenda?
Any, like, when can
Do
we,
we have any time at all, or is every hour of every next meeting
well,
taken?
so our next meeting is next Tuesday, the 14th. It's actually in New Haven. Please note, it's in New Haven. We're changing our rotation because there's a New Haven board meeting that night.
Thank you.
So that allows the New Haven folks to come directly from their school board meeting, or Ed to come directly from his school board meeting. It's currently, it is at 6:30. Sorry, we're not gonna move that earlier because of the school board meeting that day. So the goals of that meeting are to continue the report and finalize as a draft, so, yes, we can continue discussing the stuff that we haven't discussed tonight. I'm concerned that if we want to have discussion of the other articles and of the report in a way that's meaningful, like, we're either gonna need about 5 hours, or we're not gonna, we're going to have to either prioritize or spend a long time on it, is my sense. And so, and then the following week, we have Wednesday, June 22nd, which is, has not been publicly announced, but we have on the calendar as a community forum and all boards meeting. And that is, we have currently reserved Holly Hall. We're not able to use Mount Abe due to some construction that they're doing there. So we do have Holly Hall, effective at about 4:30 today, that got ironed out. Thank you, Allison, for that one too.
That's the 21st, you said?
That's
22nd.
June 22nd.
And what time?
At 6
Oh,
p.m.
Okay.
And I'm just reading off of the timeline that was in the agenda, but the locations are being changed. And then the one other, while we're talking about this, the one other update is it looks like we will need to have our meetings through the summer at the SU office conference room because we're having difficulty getting access to school buildings. So the best plan we've got at the moment is that we can meet in that conference room at the central office.
Where is that?
It's on Munsell Ave. Yeah. I think we might have met there one time.
Police station.
Andrew?
I really think we need to get through items
never
4C
been to the police
tonight,
station?
or there's not gonna be time to,
I'm not gonna say it.
I'm sorry.
It's a
what did you
heartbeat.
say? So I really think that we need to get through the items under 4C tonight to stay on the timetable.
Can we knock any off as,
Kate?
can we go through and see if any are not even legally our purview, or, I mean, at least so we've addressed a little bit of them?
So I am happy to continue discussion of those, but I think that we're gonna hear, no, I mean, I know that we've already heard some concern about the lateness and the, level of thought that we can put into them at this point in time. I know on our Moncton board, we've had deliberations on grievance hearings that have gone till 1 in the morning, although we try to avoid those. But we have definitely gone late before, and we have trail mix. Nancy?
We have trail mix. Get that in the minutes.
Nancy, did you have a comment?
Well, I just wanted to say that a little bit earlier, Ed was noting that the items under 4C he did not think were what we should take up. And I want to say that one could have argued that about school closure. But at least one member of our group, I think it was Ed, said this was something that was very important to people in his community. And so we had quite a long discussion about it, and we came to some consensus about it. And I'm not, we might not reach consensus on these, whether we talk about them tonight or next time, but they're important to somebody, just like that was important to just like school closure was important to other members in the group. So I think it's really important to give them the time they deserve.
So I would like to take a straw poll, if I'm procedurally allowed to do that, to ask how many members are willing to stay here and have some level of discussion of the items under 4C at this point in time. Can I just get a thumbs up for people who are willing to do that?
15 minutes.
Okay. It looks like the majority of the committee members are having their thumbs up. We do need to maintain at least 8 for a quorum. So, I guess we will begin discussing the items under Article 4C. Herb, I didn't see your thumbs up. I realize you're taking minutes. If you need to leave, we can transfer the responsibility for the minutes for the end of the meeting to somebody else.
That wasn't my point.
Okay,
I'm saying,
okay, thank you. Okay,
I don't think we're gonna have some serious discussion again. That's all right, let's go.
okay, Allison?
So we're tackling school choice, reduction of staff, transportation, education quality and equity, long-term cost savings, and withdrawal from district. That's what we're looking at.
Those are the, so I want to be clear, I put those on the agenda. That's just the listing of the ones that have been submitted that the committee has not officially discussed yet. It in no way requires that we discuss all of those, but those are the ones that have been submitted that have not been discussed. So for clarity's sake, I put them there.
Okay.
Allison.
I just wanted to make sure. So, on reduction of staff, transportation, and withdrawal from district, those are covered either by contract or statute. Reduction of staff, the teachers and the support staff have a contract in place that addresses those concerns, and I am comfortable with leaving that where it is. State statute covers transportation to ensure that all students get transported, and withdrawal from a district has very strict statute. So I think with those things being covered by contract and statute, they're not really something, they're not something that is in the purview of this committee to put into articles of agreement to fall on the direction of the new school board.
Which article is that, Allison?
Reduction of staff,
Okay.
transportation, and withdrawal from district.
Oh, I see.
And
Just
so
those.
that's on the pages numbered 13 and 14.
Correct.
Do you have a picture thing, Di?
Yeah.
Here's an extra one.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Nancy has her hand up.
I understand your point of view on that, Allison, but I think in terms of what voters may be, things that voters may be concerned about, even though there are limits to what we may be able to decree in articles of agreement, it may be important to address these issues. And one way of dealing with them is to make our interests clear, and then ask an attorney to help us put those interests into language that would pass muster. The interests in around reduction of staff are making sure that principals, school principals, retain the right to run open searches in their schools, and that staff are not automatically moved from one school to another under the reduction of staff and recall rules in the current contract. And that's, I think, a very important interest. You've heard me talk about it before, and I think that if we can come to agreement about what our interests are in there, we might get an attorney's help in helping us with the language. The transportation piece, I think, is probably something we all agree with. It's an equity issue, and I think that we do want to be very clear with our public that no matter what happens, whether there's choice or there isn't choice, or no matter whether a school is closed or is not closed, equity is going to be honored in a big way in relation to transportation. And I mean, there are already equity issues around transportation in this SU, particularly related to after-school availability for Mount Abraham. So I don't think that's a small matter at all.
Okay, Ed and then Allison.
I completely agree, these are not small matters in transportation. And you and I served on two efforts.
Indeed.
Which took months and failed.
Nearly killed us.
So what is the intent? To say something in the article somehow about these?
Yes.
To somehow guide the new board to do something?
as a guide for the new board and an assurance to community members. Yeah.
And if you're looking, there is some language that Nancy.
Yeah, I see
Okay, you
it.
see it. Okay.
I don't know how it can happen. As much as I fought long and hard to change the transportation system to be more fair towards the elementary and the high school, I don't see that it's appropriate for us to stick our oar into that.
Why don't we give
That
it a
the
try?
new board will take it up in due course. I hope.
Maybe.
Great. And I saw Mike had a hand up. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Allison was waiting. Thank you, Allison. And then Mike.
So, yes, I agree wholeheartedly that all of these issues are ones that deserve consideration and reflection, but I don't think they belong in the Articles of Agreement, and if we want to make our intent clear to our communities, that we've heard their concerns, we understand what the concerns are, we have our community forums as an excellent opportunity to present to our communities that yes, we understand, and we can also put that in our report, address it in some way in our report. But to make it an official article of agreement that is binding to the new board, I don't think is necessary. But I think if we address it at the community forums, which we hope a lot of people will attend, and in the information that we do put out there, I think we can address the concerns. And I don't think they need to be specifically in the Articles of Agreement.
Great. Mike was waiting for.
So I think that the retention of staff issue that Nancy raised, and I agree with her on, is an issue that arises because of the unification. It is not present today. It is a new dynamic. And so I think I first would be curious how the members of this committee feel about the ability of staff to have, I don't know what you call it, bouncing rights?
Bumping rights.
Bumping rights across schools. It might be that the majority of this committee feels that that's a good thing, in which case, well, you're not going to go the way Nancy and I want anyway. But if the committee feels that it's, and I understand that the current contract says that, but it's our opportunity to make that clear going forward. And then while we're going across issues, the transportation issue does connect with the school choice issue. I personally don't think we should be affecting the schools. I think we have a potential of doing a tremendous change to our schools with elementary school choice. And I'm opposed to it. But if we're going to have elementary school choice, I for sure want to argue strongly that it not be economically driven, that there be a guarantee of public transportation. So that's the transportation issue that rises to me, for me.
Great. So I have a couple hands over here. I think that it's going to be difficult for us to discuss all these articles commingled. So I would suggest that we pick one and start with that. I don't know if that's reasonable, but I think it's very difficult for us when we discuss lots of articles all mixed together. I think it's hard, you know, we've even taken some and split them into pieces to try to get to an agreement on just that one article. So I would encourage that. So Elin and then Sarah.
Then I'll stick with the first one, reduction in staff.
Thank you.
I feel that it's a good thing for attracting people, quality teachers to our district, to small schools, to say, we have a fluctuating population in this school, but you're part of a larger district. This is a school where you want to come. Chances are you're going to have a job next year, because with different, and you know, and the hope is that it doesn't come to bumping somebody, but it means that instead of another school hiring, that new teacher, that the district has invested time and effort into bringing them into our curriculum and bringing them into our system, is going to be somebody who stays. And so I'm very, very much in favor of having the riffing be district-wide.
Great, Sarah?
I'm sticking with that one as well. I am a teacher, and I'm part of a union, I guess, and we negotiate a contract with a school board. There are people that are put in place to do that. I don't feel like we can write the contract using the Articles of Agreement that is created between a board and a teacher's group. So I don't think it has any place in this. And I don't know how I would feel about this if that was written for me, whether I would be for or against it, so.
Okay, I think I saw Andrew, then Nancy, then Ed.
I agree completely. I don't think that it's a place for this committee to try and figure out how this should be done. I don't think we can do it. We don't have the authority to negotiate with the teachers' union. And putting something like this into the articles, at best, is going to tie the hands of the new board. At worst, it's going to create some problems that we haven't anticipated. It's a very important issue. I don't think it has any place in the articles.
Okay, Nancy?
Well, it is a very important issue, and because the decision about who teaches kids is the most important decision we make in schools, I think it's, and because this change of governance really has the potential to tie hands around decisions about who teaches kids, I think it's a deal breaker for this merger. And if we don't try to fix it, at least see what possibilities there might be for influencing how that happens. I can't see supporting this merger, and I can't see how other people would support it either. And in terms of what you said, Elin, as far as attracting people, the people that district-wide riffing, SU-wide riffing rules most disadvantages are new teachers, because they're very likely to get bumped. They're more likely to get bumped than they would if we keep it school by school. I think so.
I think that maybe we could challenge ourselves to provide evidence, as we mentioned with other assertions, because I don't know which way that might go, right? So I think we could make arguments in either direction. I think Ed had a comment.
Well, I'm ambivalent. I think there's merit on both sides. But I just cannot imagine that I will know enough about the unintended consequences of going one way or the other to actually try and make this law.
Great. Mike?
I'm going to try a motion.
Okay. Mike's going to make a motion.
That we,
What?
Was hers not a motion? Or that was just Chris?
I don't think Allison made a motion.
It was just a suggestion. Okay,
I
I'm
didn't
sorry.
make a motion.
I'm just trying to keep,
Yep.
yes.
No motion.
Mike's making a motion.
that we ask our attorneys to help us draft something that would instruct the board or direct the board to negotiate around this issue for leaving in place the current bumping rates, the current, I don't know the right word.
Riffing policies.
Riffing policies.
Riffing and recall, reduction in force and recall.
School
Can you
specific.
say that one more time?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the concept is that instead of us trying to draft it, that we ask the attorneys
With what intent?
to leave in place the current riffing policies to be school specific.
but so what I wrote down, and I didn't get the end of it right, but that you wanted to ask the attorneys to help us draft something to direct the new UU board to negotiate.
It's too
Well,
complicated.
Well,
Sorry,
no, but I
apologize.
think it's clear, it's
Yeah.
important. Are you saying that the language is going to be, like, because the language that's here is, the RIF policies will be X, right? versus we're asking the lawyers to ask the new board to negotiate something with the goal of it ending up somewhere near what's in this is very different than saying this is what it will be.
My point
right?
is to recognize that I don't know enough to know how to do this right. And that, but yet it's still an important value to me. And so I want to ask the attorneys if there's a way or how to leave in place our current briefing policies to be school specific. And if the attorneys come back and say, yeah, I can't do it, there's no way, I'll relent.
Ask attorneys how to leave current RIF and recall policies in place.
To be school specific, yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Herb. Just let me finish writing this down. Andrew, I'm gonna call on you in 1 second. I just wanna point out that we did hear from Armando on this point in past meetings. I know he's not here to represent that perspective tonight, but the way I remember his comments was that the supervisory, the administration views the larger pool of teachers to be a benefit rather than a challenge. So that is how I remember the comments he made at that time. I'm sure he said them with better words than that. So we were waiting. Andrew had his hand up, and then I got like a whole bunch of hands up. Come around.
And my suggestion is specific to this, but I think it's a little more broad. I'm just want to say that I think this committee, given our timeline and the number of questions that we have that we'd like to have answered specifically by an attorney, perhaps we should consider bringing one to the next meeting with the intent of getting the questions answered and finalizing the articles.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We will take that up after we deal with this motion.
Thank you.
Great. There were like 15 hands up.
Mine's really short.
Sarah?
In almost all these districts, the special educators have already been consolidated. They're all on one ranking thing already. It would just, I mean, I'm not sure how you would then split them back up. So I'm just throwing that in there.
Okay, Nancy?
I don't think the intent is to split those back up, Sarah. And I would say that that process has been rocky. That implementation process, because of the issue we're talking about, has been quite rocky. I have seen language would still need to be codified in a contract negotiation, but I have seen language in other articles of agreement from other SUs where they reference an existing agreement and say that that agreement will stay in place. And certainly in this case, it would have to be negotiated. I would say that another, not preferable, but a fallback position about trying to put this language in would be to give it a time limit of 3 years. And that would, the way the reduction in force language works is that a person is able to bump a less senior person or have a right to an open job within whatever district you're talking about, as long as they have the licensed and are qualified. And qualified is determined by the way that the administration, I believe, describes positions. So if there were a time frame of 3 years, that would give administration time to appropriately describe positions so that only qualified people could have them. I think that that's true.
Okay, Allison, then Mike.
The teachers and support staff are covered by a contract, and that contract will be coming to an end, and they will be renegotiating a new contract.
Right.
So to me, it's up to the teachers to negotiate their new contract with the new board, or whatever is in place at that time. And it's not up to us as a committee to either tell the teachers what should be in their new contract, or to tell the board what they should put in the contract. It's up to the board and the teachers at the time that they're making their contract. And I can almost guarantee you that the teachers are probably talking about the impact a merger would have on them, and they are trying to figure out how to make their contract best for them. And I don't think that we can put language in our articles of agreement that incorporate a unified union to tell those teachers and the board how to negotiate their contract. That's their job. We don't negotiate contracts.
Okay, Mike?
So, back to the impact. I'm actually very much agree with what Allison just said about the part of the, I have no doubt that the teachers union will fight hard for this. They want, that the teachers union will want to have the ability to have riffing rights across schools. Of course they'll want that. Does anyone know that my wife is a teacher? But just to put it into context, the job of building a great community school is about a community of people. And the thought that, sitting in Lincoln, you know, that the principal and the community comes together and builds the best staff they can, and because a riff in New Haven bounces a third grade teacher in Lincoln because she's been here 1 year less, with no ability of the school to have any impact on that, I agree with Nancy. It is a tremendous change to the ability of a principal to have some control. I'd be happy to say that a RIFT person would have would get an interview, would get considered for a job, would have a place first in line to be considered. But I don't want them to have automatic riffing ability to bump.
I see lots of hands. I want to remind us that the person that represents the administration for this committee is Armando, who has advocated that this larger seniority pool is a good thing, and that the administration, as far as the opinion he voiced, is in favor of this. So I would assume that if there were serious concerns coming up from the principals, that he would be the conduit to bring those concerns to this committee. I can only assume he's not here. We can't ask him if he has asked the principals about their opinions. I don't remember if that was any part of the discussion. I do think we've got to keep that in the discussion. So I saw Steve, you haven't talked in a while, so I don't know if you were next, but.
It's amazing, I haven't talked for a while. This is one of those places where I agree with Mike, and I agree with Allison. I agree with Mike, that does not sound like the perfect thing. I also agree that I just can't imagine that we could write language that would specify how that contract would have to be written. It's beyond the pale for me. So that's just my opinion.
Great, Nancy, then Elin.
Well, what Steve has said, that's why I support the motion, because the motion is to ask an attorney who's experienced at writing language that reflects the interests of his clients or her clients, to see what might be possible. And barring that, I would say, I think that I don't know how we could engage the association in this conversation, but I think it's an interesting question.
Can I point out that, so what hopefully this means is if there's a class less happening in New Haven, so there's a teacher in New Haven who's a mid-level, they have no young teachers, they have no first-year teachers, but somebody has retired in Starksboro, then nobody gets riffed. So if retiring is happening, and that's what's more likely to happen across a larger school, is that you have a little bit more balance of coming in and coming out, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a one-to-one shift, right? I mean, we're hoping that we have an administration that people are talking and there's some consideration about who fits where, and there's some discussion about who's the best fit and how this can be dealt with. It doesn't necessarily mean that the youngest teacher automatically loses their job in your school.
Kind of does.
So,
It only means the youngest teacher if there's one more class lost than there is retirement.
And there,
so, Sarah, did you want to make a comment? You had your hand up, I think.
I just.
I mean, 'cause
should
Oh,
say
I
this.
think, well, I will say this, CVU's district, which is Champlain Valley, so you all know that, it's not CSSU, all passed all 5 towns. Okay. The other, that was today. The other, Nancy's thought about like a year or few year idea going into it as like a transitional idea, just like the school closure thing, etc. I do not think it's a bad idea. As far as like how
you mean
to.
you almost think it's a good idea?
Well, I mean, I get the point. I just haven't felt like I
I'm
wanted
just
to be
teasing.
involved in like the contract part of it. I
Yep.
mean, I have fears of some of those things too.
Yep.
We talk about it in our office, like it's there. That's so somebody could just come in here. Oh, okay, well, but that's just in a few years. That just we are
Yeah.
a greater community, and there is a much greater as a whole. And there's a much greater sense of who each other is, and then these relationships are stronger. And maybe in the transitional period, we are not in that place. So I am okay if we need to look at it for a short period of time, like she first suggested.
Okay, Allison?
So the administration and the principals, they hire and place the teachers. And they do that based on, I'm assuming, our ends policy and what's best for the kids. And I cannot see principals or a superintendent or an assistant superintendent capriciously making a decision to just based on seniority and everything without, and we currently also
Sounds
have the
crazy.
RBO
It does sound crazy.
discussion going on at the moment. And we are trying to work in a more collaborative way between the administration, the teachers, and the boards, and all of those things. And I'm willing to place my trust in the teachers to determine what is best for them in their new contract when that time comes forward, and for the administration and the principals to make the best decisions for our kids. And I do not believe that we need to do that for them. Our ends policies govern us as a board, and whoever ends up on that new board, and the RBO is making significant strides, would be my guess, right, Elin? I don't know, I don't wanna speak for them, but personally, it seems to me they're making great strides on trying to improve the climate in our district. And yes, we've had a difficult past year and a half, but I honestly think we're moving beyond that. And for me, it's simple. We can't dictate what the teachers and the administration are gonna put in their contract.
Okay, Herb?
I want to respond to that point, Allison, and something that Steve had mentioned earlier, that it really isn't within our purview as a committee to rewrite the contract. And I think that's what this is proposing to do. It is because state law says the contract that's in place is the contract.
Absolutely.
But if you recall our discussion last week around this issue, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, the issue isn't what's in the contract. It's what the provisions in the existing contract mean now that we're going from 6 boards to 1. And so that's not rewriting, in my view, that's not rewriting the contract. It's simply the committee saying what it thinks, how it thinks that provision should be included, should be construed. So it's not rewriting it, it's just saying, well, you got a different situation, you got 6 boards, you got down to 1. How are you gonna apply that provision? So you're not changing, you're not rewriting it. You're just, this is what we think it means. And frankly, I thought at our last meeting, we agreed on the record. I can't remember if there was a vote, but I thought we agreed on the record that the current contract meant that RIF rights and whatever are school-specific until unless and until the contract is renegotiated between the teachers and the administration.
Right, so I would love to agree with that. So we had a discussion under the, I don't remember what article it is, but it's about the first year of operations. I think it's Article 5, about the first year of operations, which talks about how the current contract will be interpreted. And we looked at some of the current contract language and determined that until a new contract was in place, that we felt that we were okay, that if we were operating under the pre-existing contracts, that each school district that currently exists would continue to be interpreted as a district until we had a new contract. The reason that I believe that this is up for discussion now is because now we're talking about not just in the period where we're still working under an old contract because a new one hasn't been signed. This is saying any new contract that is made would need to consider this, like the previous style of RIF and recall, as opposed to the board and the teachers being able to negotiate what works best for them at that point in time. Right, so it's a little bit of a distinction between that first year and, I think there was another hand. Nancy?
The motion on the table is to get a legal opinion from the attorney that's chosen by the committee, and I just think we should do that, because I think we don't know what's possible, because we're not attorneys.
Right.
I mean, one of us is, maybe more than one, but I'm not.
So, thank you, Nancy, for the reminder. We do have a motion on the table. The motion was to ask our attorney how to leave the current RIF and recall policies as school-specific. That motion was seconded. So, to me, voting in favor of the motion means that we would like to have further discussions with our lawyer about this topic. So at this point, I'd love to call for a vote. We continue to have 10 committee members here, I think. I don't think anyone else snuck out. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. So all those in favor of asking the attorneys how to leave the current RIF and recall policies as school-specific? Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed? 2 opposed. Any abstentions?
It's just not right. I'm going to vote in favor, please.
Say, what?
I'm not going to abstain. I'm going to vote in favor.
Can we?
All right, so we're going to change the count then to 7 to 2 to 1, so then the motion carries. Is that?
Yes.
You're raising your hand, Nancy,
No,
and then all the vote. Is
I
that
was
okay?
just voting again in case that would be
Okay.
helpful.
So with Steve changing his vote, which I again would like to restate, like just vote in the first place already, make my life
I'm
easier.
sorry.
But
I
we're
apologize.
making that vote the vote was 7 to 2 to 1. I was abstaining because my vote was not required. 7 is enough to pass that motion, so we will have further discussion with our lawyer about this article. All right. Great discussion.
Michael, here's papers.
Can you make a note of that?
What?
Can I, before someone makes a motion to adjourn, can I ask for a short conversation about school choice?
Please.
So I believe that the straw poll at the table was that we were gonna keep talking about these.
Tell them to motion to adjourn.
That's quite a one.
I just wanna say that I think, yeah, we still had a couple other things we were gonna talk about after we stopped talking about articles, but, yeah. So Mike would like to take up school choice next.
So if I could just talk for a minute, as a parent, of course I want school choice. Of course I want to put my kid in whichever classroom, in whichever school. But as thinking about the school community, and I've put a lot of time into this and I asked a lot of people and I got a variety of opinions. I came more and more to fear the potential impact, and it doesn't take much. You move 4 fourth graders from families that are motivated and have the means. We don't have from Starksboro to Moncton, let's just say, you've had a big impact on that classroom, huge impact, with just a few kids. And I just have come to really be very concerned about the way that it could create a form of tracking in our 5 towns. And there'll be a set of families that will be motivated to do it, and there'll be a set of families that won't be able to wrap their heads around it. And schools are their best when it's heterogeneous. And so that's my argument.
Thank you. Ed?
Couldn't agree more. We've experienced choice in a small way, high school, and it's a lottery, isn't it? A couple of kids a year can, if they get it, can choose a different school. And I know we've had kids that go to Middlebury largely because they have hockey, you know, but for other reasons too, I guess. So you might say, well, let's have a lottery and have just a couple of kids go, be able to move around, or like Allison says, if they happen to be extremely close to another school, allow them to go there under certain conditions. Well, our schools are small enough that 1 or 2 or 3 make a difference. They do. And we have been built on philosophy for a long time of heterogeneous classrooms. We don't track. We haven't tracked in at least 25 years. And we really do believe everybody is educable. And I think I got that word from Nancy 5 years ago.
Great, and I just want to, so hopefully everyone noticed that there is some language on the page that's numbered 13 in the packet. And Allison, I'll just speak for you because I know that the language that you have here was pulled out of, I have no idea what, some other set of articles. What?
Franklin Central.
Franklin Central, from some other district that was considering choice. And just at the risk of stating the obvious, that our committee has the opportunity to adopt an article that is in favor of choice, that is against choice, or to not speak to choice and to allow the future board to deal with that, right? So at this point, or there's yet another possibility that I haven't envisioned, but there would possibly be at least those 3 options. So Ela and then Nancy.
I think that I completely agree with what both of you have said, but you know, I had a friend who was in New Haven, and it all came together at the last minute, but her daughter was going to be the only girl in her class.
That my daughter is the owner.
I mean, there's some reasons why, you know, if somebody's a special ed need, you have somebody who speaks sign language in one school, and there's another kid who speaks sign language of a similar age in another school. I mean, there are a bunch of reasons why you might not want to make really strict, we're not going to let this happen. And I'm not sure how I balance this, and so I'm not. The idea that maybe there could be a school that does language, and it would have to have transportation, absolutely have to have transportation. But I love that idea that maybe there could be a magnet school or 2.
Okay, I think we had Nancy next and then Ed.
Well, I think the equity issues related to school choice systems are legion. And I actually, many years ago, I studied this when I was in school. And one of the things and I started out thinking choice system is the way to go, give everybody a choice. There are a whole lot of reasons why I thought that was a good idea. And the more I studied it, and this was painful because I was a young thing, and so coming to a conclusion opposite of my first assertion was not good. It was hard. But what I came to understand was that not all families have, because of the different stresses that families are under, not all families have the same ability to make informed choices, no matter what you do in terms of informing. So I would really, I thought that the state had made either the state board or the legislature had made some things clear about Act 46 not being, that its intent was not to increase school choice. But, and I don't know where the law ended up on that, but I think it would be a good idea to, I mean, I think that this language is not talking about anecdotal cases, that it's talking about, are we going to set up a school choice system in this unified union, or are we not? And I think this language says, no, that's not where we're going with this, because of equity reasons.
I think Ed was waiting, and then I think I saw Kate.
In the case of special needs, it seems, I believe the superintendent has the authority to grant special requests. My son was one. We moved from Bristol to New Haven in February, and the superintendent allowed him to finish the year in Bristol. But the flip side of it is, though, that looking down the road, what if the new board decides to use the buildings differently? It's not choice, it's, building magnet schools or something like that. Would anything we say about choice affect their ability to do that?
That was what I was
wouldn't
worried.
want to interfere with I don't want to tie their hands that way.
Great, I think Kate was waiting. No? Did you have your hand up, Allison? Okay, Mike?
I think I would.
You would
Want to tie their hands.
Yeah.
If we had 2 high schools in this district, absolutely, I love the idea of creating of specializing, of focusing them.
Not a magnet school. If in order to get bigger fourth grades, you put 2 Moncton and New Haven's 4th grades together for educational reasons.
I keep, maybe it's because I'm from this little tiny community here. The value is in the community that is built in this building, and the interchange that happens between, 5th and 6th graders reading to 1st and 2nd graders, kindergartners and 1st graders. And the value is the community of learning, the ability to feel a belonging to a learning community. And it's why I don't want teachers moving around as cogs. Teachers are not cogs. They're teams. It's the same reason why I don't want kids moving around. I'm happy to say that if the move is motivated by the school for educational purposes, I'm not going to stand in the way of that. That makes total sense around a particular need. So that's where I come to it from.
Andrew, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say that this discussion should really be one that the new board has when they're figuring out the policy or directing the superintendent to come up with this. These are all important issues, and we've kind of mixed together a couple of them, whether we're talking about student by choice, student by need, or because of some other reason. I think yet again we're trying to predict a future situation and write down some rules, and I don't know that it's productive. I think that the list of A through E that came from those other articles came through as a recommendation, and I think it sends a strong message to the new board that those things should be considered, and I think that is as far as I would recommend that we go. I wouldn't want to write into the articles any restrictions or any specific policy about how this issue should be handled.
I will call on you in a minute. We've heard a lot from you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Any other committee members we haven't heard from on this issue?
a motion.
Tom was about to make one.
Mike?
Go ahead.
Well, I won't surprise you, Andrew, that I disagree with you. I think it is a new dynamic created by the forming of the union, and I would recommend, for what it's worth, that we take a stand on it, and I'd love to have a vote on it. So I'll make a motion that we not allow. Can I make a motion that is? I'd like to make a motion that's not specific to words. It's the concept.
So I think you can make a motion about a concept, but the motion by definition is specific words,
Yeah.
right?
You can make a motion that,
French.
that this article be written by somebody and include these things, if you don't wanna do the specific article now,
We've done that.
right?
Yes,
That there be no parent-directed school choice, family-directed school choice.
About family initiated.
Thank you. Initiated school
Edit
choice
your-
in elementary schools in our district.
A second.
And may I modify just to say instead of in the new unified union? Is that okay? Because you said in our district. But
Yes, that is okay.
I know you said you didn't want it to be about words, but I was gonna write it that way and I didn't wanna write it
That
not the
sounds,
way you said
that
it.
sounds great, John.
Thank you for your flexibility tonight. Okay, we have a motion, it's been seconded. Kate?
Oh, just clarification, with the understanding that the superintendent has the authority to move or allow a child to stay, as in like Ed gave an example of.
Yes.
I think he already has a.
Yeah, so we're just,
And that's why I phrased it family.
Okay, gotcha.
initiated.
Other discussion?
I do want to note that I have often made arguments about how popular my stance is. I don't believe that my stance on this is necessarily popular with the public. I think a lot of people want school choice because they're thinking about their own child.
Wait, Sarah?
I only bring up two scenarios that I would worry about. One is having the only girl in a class, which I do. And two is bullying. And I just would hope that if your kid is in a small school and that's the only option and whatever, that there are options, and it's hard to know. You can't foresee everything. That's I guess what I worry about.
That would be a superintendent decision again.
I agree with you on that. I just want to throw it out there.
Gosh, that's like hitting home. We have a friend whose family had the means to send their child to private school because she was being bullied, and isn't that an example of inequity right there?
Really?
No.
It really is.
Okay, Allison?
So, with this motion, if a family initiates a school choice move for a child being bullied, are we saying that we are not allowing that at all, regardless of what the superintendent might decide? Unless we put that language in here, that's how that would read to me.
To me-
Family initiated choice for whatever reason.
To me, it means if the family goes to the school board, but if the teacher or the principal or the superintendent goes to the school board, that's different. And so you just know how the system works.
The family would have to advocate with the superintendent for the
But I mean-
superintendent
Goes right back to
make-
equity.
But don't you, I'm out of turn.
All right, yeah, sorry, Nancy.
I mean, I think we understand the intent, and an attorney will help us with the language.
Okay, Elon, did you?
That, I'm fine with that.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we will go to a vote. The motion that there be no family-initiated school choice in the elementary schools in the new unified union, language to be formalized by a lawyer. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3. Is that everyone who wanted to vote in favor? All those opposed? We have 1, 2, 3, 4. And any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. That adds up to the right number of people, right? So the motion does not carry. So that was, sorry, 3, 4, 3. So we are again in limbo. Okay, Steve?
No, we're not. Limbo, it fails.
Well, that motion failed, but that
Right.
leaves us uncertain about what our path is on school choice, right? I guess that's what I meant by, when we have a motion and the motion is not successful, then we have decided not to pursue that motion. We haven't necessarily decided what we wanna do about school choice. So I got Steve, and I got Nancy, then Ed.
So I was wondering if the chair would entertain, I believe there's some other topics to be discussed under other business here. And I didn't know if the chair was ready to take those up.
Okay, Nancy?
I make a motion that we adjourn. I can't think straight anymore.
Okay, is there a second?
What was the motion?
To adjourn.
To adjourn.
Sure. Was there a second?
Not yet.
Oh, second, just, we
Okay.
can use second. Did you say? I'll second.
Okay, Herb seconded that, right?
Yep.
All those in favor of adjourning? 2, all those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Opposed is the
6.
wrong word.
It is definitely the wrong word. 6 opposed, any abstaining?
That's the first.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a motion to adjourn.
2 abstaining, so the motion does not pass. Ari's like, I'm out of here anyway.
All right, thank you.
That's
I
historic.
was asked by Corey
2,
to
6.
turn off, to turn the lights off in here, close the windows, and lock the door. So if I could pass that responsibility.
Lock the door
Which
to the
door?
library.
This door, it says the door to the library. All the other doors are locked.
Okay,
So if you leave, you can't come back.
Madam Chair,
This is your opportunity to
lock
leave.
the library
Nancy and Mike.
windows, not the door.
Is it your intent to go to the bottom,
Right now.
update from working groups?
So Steve just made a suggestion that we move to the bottom of the agenda.
I tried to.
Not quite to that part of the bottom. Ed had his hand up, so. You had your hand up before, so before the
Oh,
motion to adjourn.
I was wondering if we could put a statement of our intent about school choice into the report.
I've seen that.
So that would not be a binding part of the articles, but it would just be a statement of the.
But it's mentioned.
Okay.
Why don't you put it
Is
in-
that a motion?
No,
don't need
it's a
motion.
suggestion.
Okay.
What would it say? What is our intent on school choice?
Alright, so Mike is inquiring what such
Advice
a
to the board.
what such an addition to the report might say.
Well, yeah. We got two
Well, I think our
demonstrates
committee
we
would
took
have
it
to
up.
determine what our intention was prior to being able to write that into the report, and we would also have to determine, right,
Couple of
whether
phrases.
that,
We got three,
whether
four,
we
three.
consider that to be sufficient.
So what's your plan?
So, I guess about an hour ago, we did a straw poll on who wanted to keep working on the articles. I know Nancy, anyone who voted for adjourning, I'm thinking doesn't want to do that, so, can I see how many people want to continue working on the articles? Anyone? So give me a thumbs up if you're like, yes, keep going, thumbs down if
Oh,
you're
you
like,
guys are
stop going.
Crazy.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, and we got 2 thumbs down, so, Herb and Elon didn't weigh in. My only concern is that, while certainly committee members could leave, that we need to have a quorum to be able to continue.
How big is a quorum?
8.
8.
We need to have 8 to be able to have to officially continue.
See ya.
1, 2.
No, Elon just went
Nancy,
to the
Nancy,
bathroom.
just leave.
There's
Well, but
no
Elon's only in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah. I'll leave with you.
You will?
No, it's not fair.
It's not fair.
Just to leave.
Kate, it's okay.
I'm just wondering if we can come up with some language to agree on school choice and our intent. Knock it out. And I know you're still debating about whether we should be done.
So, Elin, just to put you on the spot, so Elin and Herb, while Elin was out of the room, we had a straw poll of how many committee members were interested in continuing to discuss the articles and how many members were not interested in discussing the articles. So we had 6 people in favor of continuing to discuss and 2 people not in favor, which was just a straw poll. But we need to have 8 for a quorum, and so I am putting you on the spot. Elin and Herb, are you willing to stay and continue discussing the articles? I got a yes from Elin.
You know, at this point, we're not going to have a serious discussion. This is what I mentioned before. You know, with the time here, probably won't change at the next meeting, but we're just not going to have a serious discussion either. It's just meeting the next meeting. So what does that mean? Well, far be it from me to not continue the meeting. So I'm okay. I'll go forever.
I think that it is, thank you for your willingness to continue. I think that we really do need to have an imminent ending point to this meeting. This is late, and I assume that we all have to go to work in the morning and be some lively semblance of ourselves at that point. I think that what we can do is maybe have about 10 more minutes of discussion on some part of the articles. We do need to talk a little bit about the community forum and about choosing a lawyer, and I think that then we could shoot to wrap up by 11 and maybe sooner. Okay. Allison?
I make a motion that we approve school choice as written under a Sturdivant as an article of agreement. Actually, I want to amend that.
You're still making the motion, that's been seconded, so
Yeah,
I
so
guess you can
actually, I want to put the school choice under a Sturdivant as written in the report to show our intent. But,
Does that include both paragraphs or just?
yes, yep, the unified union should have future A through E, all of it.
In the report and not in the articles.
Correct.
So I'm gonna write down that Allison moved to include the school choice language in the report. Is there a second?
I'll second, and with the note that what I notice about this is that it's strictly an advisory. It's sort of would, could. There's no shall, will. It's all conditional. That the unified school district with 5 school choice would be a consideration for a board. That it could think about it. That's all it says.
I just might clarify that last sentence before the A says they will enact policies considering but not limited to. So I think that while there's a lot of should, may.
Oh, you're correct.
Right, it does say that, I read it to say that if they do decide to go forward with choice, they will enact
Right,
policies.
should it decide that it wants to do school choice, then it sort of lays out some stuff. But it gives the choice to the board.
Okay, Nancy?
I actually think that it will be confusing to people to be making statements apart from the articles, because people will not necessarily understand that it's not something that it has any force at all.
Yeah.
And so I really think it's the opposite of transparency to do that. Even though I understand the desire to want to, I have as much desire to advise to put things in that didn't make it to the Articles of Agreement. I just don't, I think it's confused, it'll be confusing.
Great, Herb?
So if we, I'm
Oh.
saying, if we're not ready to put it, make it an article, we shouldn't do it at all.
Great, Herb?
For a different reason, I agree with Nancy. The language here, Allison, I think would be, if I were on the new board, this would be a signal that school choice is a good idea. That's just the way I'm reading it here. It's not a neutral statement. And so it's very much different than what other people have been talking about. Whether you put it in the, I mean, I agree. So it's in the report, and it doesn't have any sort of force because it's not in the articles, but it's a pretty clear thing.
Great, Sarah?
Actually agree with Herb on that, in that there wasn't, I think if our intent was that it's not preferred school choice, then that tone would need to change within this writing. So I think if it's not, I'm not opposed to the writing, but I actually do think it would be confusing as to what our goals were. So if our intent was to avoid school choice, then we would want to showcase that. I don't know what our intent is, but.
I would say that the intent of this this language is generally favorable, right? It is the opposite of saying we will not offer school choice. It's not saying we will offer school choice. It's saying that should at some point the board think about wanting to do that, there's some things they need to do, right? But it is definitely not saying don't do school choice. So we're gonna have a vote on this. I think that's what the hand gesture was about. So the motion was to include the school choice language presented by Allison Sturdivant in the packet, and to include that in the report. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oh. All those opposed. We have a unanimous vote against the motion. I don't think has that ever happened? Okay, I guess we didn't like that.
Still, it was an interesting idea to consider.
Yeah,
You know.
I like it.
No.
Why don't you go for it?
Just
We seem to be
tell me.
good at helping
Just
people
not-
reword their motions
So,
in the go. Kate
if you
Kate
really
would
need
like
to
to make a
leave,
motion.
I'll hang your shirt.
Yeah,
You can do it, Kate.
You
No,
got it, Kate.
No, it's all right.
Talking out of turn.
I'm just seeing if she's, physically able to.
Is she physically able to
No, well,
continue?
we'll see.
That hurt my feelings.
How many fingers? I didn't mean it that way.
So Kate would like to make a motion.
No, I think we're close on this.
So take a stab at it. You can do it.
I like Mike's. I just think it needs a little expansion. And I don't want to say, well, families will not have the choice, so help me out here.
So
The first sentence is good.
Yeah, I agree.
Could we put in unless under extenuating circumstances?
So, meaning at the end of the second sentence, families will not have the choice to send their elementary age students to any school in the district except under extenuating circumstances. Which I don't know if the lawyers might wonder what that means, but Andrew, is that?
I know it's a fleeting word.
I agree that that's a subjective word, and I was just gonna suggest that we phrase that positively and
Right.
said that, families with extenuating circumstances may be granted an
Yes,
exception.
that's what I want to say.
So that would be a
But- but-
third sentence,
And I'm offering that even though I don't think it's a good idea.
but that would be a
And
third.
that's how tired he is.
Is that the third sentence, or is that changing the
worn
second
it down.
sentence?
Changing second. Finally.
Families with extenuating circumstances may request.
May request the consideration.
Okay, so
But
we,
overall, we support the education of our students in our own communities.
What if we just kept it to the first sentence?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
It does say it.
so at this point, Kate, threatened to make a motion. I don't think you actually made a motion.
No, I
Do
did
you
not.
want to make a motion, or does someone else want to make a motion? Because we're gonna stop talking about the articles here in a couple minutes. So this is probably like the last opportunity to make a motion about an article tonight. Don't all jump out of your seats at once.
I make a motion
Yep, go ahead, Allison.
that we put in as an article of agreement, school choice, to state the Unified Union Board shall support the education of students in their own community school. Families with extenuating circumstances may request school choice. Do I have that correct, Kate? Or did I miss something?
Friendly amendment would be,
Well, it's not
Okay.
technically moved yet, so yeah,
Right.
just suggested.
Families-
superintendent would hold their authority to provide a solution for families with an issue.
Extenuating.
Yeah.
Extenuating circumstances.
So you're
that's
suggesting different wording for the second sentence.
Is the first sentence okay?
I like the first one.
Okay. So then, are you gonna start with the superintendent?
What do you think?
There's only one girl in the classroom.
Retains their current authority to provide a solution for a family with extenuating circumstances. Maybe we need to clarify that phrase.
And the lawyers can help us get the exact words
Okay.
as long as we understand what we're trying to say,
Right.
right? So what I hear that we're trying to say here is we're trying to say that the new union values educating students in their own school. The superintendent can make exceptions to those policies in extenuating circumstances.
What was the first sentence? That was a different sentence than this one.
No, it's the same.
I just was paraphrasing. The Unified Union Board shall support the education of students in their own community school. The superintendent retains the authority to, and then, I don't know, I started writing a bunch of stuff, to provide a school choice solution, I don't know, for families when needed. How about that? Do we really need to say
students.
extenuating for
For
students?
Students.
It's fine.
Okay, so hold on. So because I don't even think we got a seconded motion yet. Let me read it one more time. The Unified Union Board shall support the education of students in their own community school. The superintendent retains the authority to provide a school choice solution for students, period. Is that the motion, Kate?
For
Yes.
students when needed.
You said when needed before. Didn't you?
It's your motion. Do you want when needed?
Yep, it's not my motion.
Yes.
Okay, for students when needed.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Steve, so, wait. Okay, now I'm confused, because it was actually your motion.
Yes, it's my
I'm
motion.
sorry.
Go for it.
It is quarter to 11.
Do
So
you
this
need
was
me to read it?
Allison's motion. As long as you're okay with what I read, I don't need you to read it again. I asked Kate
The
if she was
superintendent
okay.
retains the authority to provide a school choice option for students when needed.
Change the word solution to option.
Or well, solution.
That's all right. No, option probably is, I don't know. Your motion, I was confused on. So Allison moves, seconded by Steve, is that right?
Yep.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Holy moly, we have another unanimous vote.
Are you
Time for bed.
yes? Are you yes?
I bet you didn't expect
Yeah,
that.
all the hands were up.
Wow.
Is any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm ready.
Okay, unanimous.
Kate, what's
Okay.
your next motion?
Just need to compromise.
She's on a roll, she's on a roll.
All right, you guys, this is why people meet till 11 o'clock at night, because sometimes, like, stuff gets done. On the other hand, we all are zombies tonight and tomorrow. So, we have, so tonight on our articles, we dealt with community relationships, we dealt with Article 7, and we have now dealt with school choice. That still leaves,
And we dealt with the RIF.
we did not deal with the RIF.
So
Yeah, we did.
We're gonna have a
We
lawyer.
dealt with it.
Did we pass that?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
Motion
Okay,
is to
you're
ask
right.
the attorney how to leave on our current policy in place to be school specific.
Okay,
I thought we did, but it didn't pass, did it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, it did,
That's
7-2-1.
okay.
just to have a
Okay,
lawyer
yes.
look at it.
Okay, so that means
They're
that next
wasting their
week,
time.
we will have the opportunity to talk about transportation, education quality and equity, long-term cost savings and withdrawal from the district, assuming that we still feel that we need to discuss all of those. So those are on the list. We will need to be efficient in discussing those while we also are discussing the report next week. Nice work tonight, everyone. We continue to make some decisions and have some really great discussions. We do,
I'm on your same track, go ahead.
okay, we do need to very briefly talk about the community forum that is scheduled for June 22nd. As I mentioned before, that's gonna be at Holly Hall because we're not able to use Mount Abe. We have, as of this afternoon, confirmed that we can have it at Holly Hall, so we are ready to announce that. I expect the announcements will go out hopefully tomorrow, if I can find some time to work on ACT46 stuff tomorrow. Yeah. So that needs to get out there and get on people's calendars. Mike had raised a question about whether we wanted to have a facilitator at that session, and Mike has a little bit more information about this. We're gonna try and keep this a focused conversation due to the
So,
time of the evening.
Nancy, I contacted Nancy Annette, she said she was willing to do it, and she asked for $200 in compensation, and said that as a part of that, she would want to meet with a small group to understand our motivations and what we're hoping to get out of the meeting, and to then be a part of the facilitation. I went to Jen and said, what do you want to do with that request? And she said, let's bring it here to see what people think.
So, Mike, could you take 30 seconds to express what you believe the benefit of having a facilitator, and then Elena?
So I think one of the problems with, with our last community meeting is that we were in the place of both trying to facilitate maybe members of the audience that were speaking too long, and also gatekeeping. How much do we answer questions? How much do we keep it something that's really about community giving their input? And I think a skilled facilitator is going to be able to take instruction from us in advance and be able to really just be a traffic cop, and a disinterested one that's doesn't have an interest in the outcome. And I just think it runs a better meeting.
Great, Elena, then Ed?
Is that something that the grant can pay for? Is that like postage?
So, we
not
would
like
need to
those.
look into whether the grant could cover that, because technically it can cover consulting services. I think that we should work under the assumption that the grant will not cover that, and it would come out of the $5,000 that was allocated by the executive committee. I don't know 100% for sure, but we do have some money that has been allocated, but we need to determine if that's something that we want to spend that money on. Okay. So Ed and then Nancy?
Is the forum a place where we, as members of this committee, listen and not speak? And just take in kind of like a board meeting? And not respond directly?
She'll
So-
design it. She'll design it for us.
But I would say at this point that the board is expected to have our articles together and to have our report, a draft of our report that is getting ready to go for review. That we will certainly be looking for input from the community if they have concerns or questions or issues with anything that we've put in there. But our role will be to be explaining the work that this committee has done and the decisions that this committee has made and why we have made those decisions. So we certainly want to make sure that we don't spend the majority of the time talking. But I think that it is clear that we will be trying to explain how the committee has come to the decisions that it has come to.
That's the challenge.
Yes.
All right, I had someone, Nancy, were
Nancy.
you next, and then Steve?
Yeah, I would just say that the work that Michael has described by Nancy Annette is consulting. And I suggest that we forego asking permission and, if necessary, beg forgiveness.
And in
That is on the
and so we can't, I don't
Okay,
have
I
the,
make a
I don't
motion
have the
to-
knowledge to determine that. We can certainly send the question over to Howard and see if we can get an answer on how it will get paid for. One way or another, we do have the ability to pay for it because we do have some money that has been set aside. It's just whether the money can come out of the grant or whether the money can come out of the money that has been set aside by the executive committee. It's more a question of, does this committee, the members of this committee that are still awake at this time of night, value having those services, right? So, Steve, you were up next.
I move that we accept that offer of $200, that we agree to pay Yvette $200, and that we have the communications committee meet with her to work on what the committee's intentions and vision is for that meeting.
So just a second, is there a second for that motion? Ed, was that Ed seconding? Okay.
One moment.
Okay, Andrew,
I just want to make sure I can be included in that conversation.
Absolutely.
okay, and any other discussion? Ellen?
Can I ask who the communication committee is?
Yep, so it's myself, Steve,
you're in it.
Ed,
You're in it.
Allison,
In abstention.
A lot of you.
and, yeah,
I was wondering if
and
it was
Mike.
2 or 3 or, okay.
and Mike, and then Allison, oh my gosh,
That's
I
his
just
name,
called you
Andrew.
Allison.
It's an A name.
That's fine, Andrew.
And Andrew has requested to be in that conversation as well. Mike, I will ask for you, oh wait, should the motion pass? Let's wait till that happens.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Allison?
I'd just like to state that any conversations with Nancy Annette happen with the communications committee as a whole, and there are no side conversations.
What do you mean by that, Allison?
I can't go have dinner with them?
So related to this event,
Related to this event, and so if Nancy had a question for the committee, the communications committee about something, that if she were to ask one specific individual, then that individual would work with the communications committee before providing an answer to Nancy.
the communications working group, so.
Working group.
I can say that I have enough trust in Nancy that she wouldn't listen to me anyway.
Okay, so the motion was to accept the $200 proposal to hire Nancy Yannette as the facilitator and to have the communications working group work with her to structure that event. Is that loosely what you said?
Absolutely.
All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, we have a unanimous vote. Great, nice work. Excellent. So please, please, please put June 22nd on your calendar. We will be looking forward to that. We have,
And we're gonna need some setup help because it's in Holly Hall, so we'll reach out for that as we get closer.
okay, so the other, we need to talk about lawyers. We had a couple names that were floated last time. There's Chris Leopold, who I understand is sort of the guy who's done most of the reviews. And then there's Pietro Lynn, who is also available, and I think in your email today, you floated Steve Stitzel's name, which I think is maybe not as closely linked with these merger proposals, but that's a lawyer that we have used frequently when we've needed to use lawyers in this SU. Nancy?
I'd also like to suggest Paul Gillis.
Is Paul Gillis someone who reviews merger proposals?
I believe so.
Do you have any information on that,
I
Andrew?
haven't heard, I don't know anything about him.
Okay, Allison?
Are Chris Leopold and Lynn Pietro available in this time frame?
The three attorneys that I know are available to review the documents. I do want to bring up the issue that I raised earlier. I'm really concerned that we may not get, with only one more meeting, to a good place with the vision of this committee and the articles without having the attorney come to the next meeting, whoever it is that we choose. I just don't think there's enough time for back and forth. It's an expensive proposition, but that's my recommendation if we're truly gonna have a meaningful presentation in 2 meetings to the public.
So before we get to that, because I do think that we need to come to that, so you spoke with, I believe you spoke with Chris and Pietro. They're both available in the time frame that we're looking at. The cost is similar.
And Steve as well, I just emailed with Steve, they're all available to review documents in the time frame that we have, so end of June to middle of July, they're all roughly $200 an hour.
That's about what I charged.
$1,000.
$1,000 to come to our meeting.
Okay, so before we talk about whether we want to ask a lawyer to come to our next meeting, we need to decide. I mean, one possibility is that you guys could delegate it to the chair to make a decision about the lawyer. I don't know if that's what you want to do. That's fine if that's not what you want to do. But we need to decide how we're going to pick a lawyer, because if we haven't picked a lawyer, we certainly can't invite them to come to the next meeting, right? So we gotta do the horse first, and then, right, the cart, whatever, however that goes. Oh my gosh, we had a lot of hands. Nancy.
Well, I'm actually very concerned about both those names, because at one of our last meetings, Andrew quoted one of them. He didn't say which one, so we don't know, as saying that he was used to, basically the gist of it was, he was used to saying no to ideas that weren't part of boilerplate language. And I think we've talked about some interests that aren't part of boilerplate language. And I think we'll be looking for an attorney who is more intent on discerning our interests and writing language that reflects them.
Great. There were some hands on the side of the table. No, Herb?
My recollection of what Amy said was that both attorneys expressed similar views. And I know it took some of us aback. I don't know whether, lost in translation, but my view is the attorney should be advising the committee as opposed to having a predetermined opinion about what's right.
Steve?
I guess I'd ask Nancy and something about Paul Gillis, just to find out who he is.
I don't know him well. Do you know him?
Yeah, Paul is a very well-respected attorney in Montpelier. He was with the Secretary of State he was the attorney for the Secretary of State for a number of years. Actually, I think technically he was the Deputy Secretary.
Yep.
And so he had to deal with a lot of issues, not only around town government, but education government as well. So he's got a pretty good background in that. I don't know whether he has specific familiarity with merger stuff. I don't think I think he's fully capable of handling that. The other aspect that I would think he might be, maybe he's not available, who knows, but I think that he's intriguing is because he does have that background with municipal and school board governance. He understands the nuances around that, and he understands what local interests are all about. He's a big historian, legal historian.
Can we focus? Sorry.
That's right. That's a piece. So, yeah, go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
Ed?
Right. I was gonna ask, Andrew, who do you recommend and why?
And first, just to try to clarify,
Focus. It's 11 o'clock at night.
I can't answer the second question without the first. My intent was to relay that the attorneys who have had the largest number of articles approved by the state board both relayed to me that they know when to tell committees what they can do and when they can tell committees what is not likely to be approved. based on that, I would recommend either of those two attorneys, Pietro Lynn or Chris.
Leopold?
Thank you. I think I might recommend Chris Leopold because I understand that he also is very well versed in the Equal Protection Clause questions, and he would be our best resource for that.
Okay, Allison and Nancy?
So Jen's question was, do we need to have a study committee vote on who our attorney is, or can we delegate that to the chair of the committee and go forth from there?
I'd like to see a
Nancy?
vote first.
I would also like to add that I've heard, not directly, that Paul Gillis is interested in this work. Not our work particularly, but the work of reviewing study committee, Act 46 study committee's work.
Mike and Allison?
So, I know there was translation and I don't know what was actually said, but I just say in the positive, I sure want to, I don't want to pay someone $200 an hour to come and tell us, no. I want to pay someone $200 an hour to come and tell us, I hear what you want to do, and let's figure out a way to frame it in a way that's most likely to pass muster, whatever. So I guess I would like to know, I also know Paul Gillis from his work in public service. Always found him to be a incredibly honorable, trustworthy witness. Served on government operations for a number of years. So I would like to at least know whether he's available.
Allison?
I make a motion that if Paul Gillis is not available, that we contract with Chris Leopold as our attorney.
What's the other half of that? What if he
If he is available.
If he is available, then
Can I request that you phrase your motion in a more directive way, like, and you can, obviously, you can make a motion as you want, but might I suggest something like, I move that we request the chair contact Paul Gillis and find out if he is available and
Go from there.
is willing to do this, and if not, then, or something like that, because I wanna be clear that we know what's happening from here.
Sounds good.
I don't know if that's okay with you.
So moved.
What she said.
So moved.
Okay, so, now I didn't write it down, but that's
So
all right.
direct the chair, I make a motion to direct the chair to contact Paul Gillis to see if he is available.
And able to attend our next meeting.
No, that's a different question.
That's a different question.
Okay.
See if he's available.
See if he's available
To talk to an attorney
for our time frame.
about any of this. So it's done.
And if not, correct.
And project, right, I mean,
Oh, and project.
right, I mean, we need to ask him, like,
Good job, Lynn.
if he would be willing to review this sort of a thing, right?
Their vote's probably still going
And if not,
That we contract
on. Their vote probably.
with Chris Leopold.
Post close and count them.
okay, seconded by Kate. Okay, Herb?
I'm gonna move to divide the question. I would like to direct you to, contact Chris. I think that'd be a good idea, see if he's available.
Chris or Paul?
I'm sorry, Paul. But without, I'm not comfortable with Chris Leopold just getting what you had said about it.
Is there a second for separating the question? I assume someone has to second a motion to separate
Yep.
an existing motion.
Actually,
Are you
No.
seconding it, or
sure, I'll second it.
are you also wanting to have discussion, Mike?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure what was going on with your hand there. Okay, so is there any discussion about splitting the question? whatever, separate the question.
Sorry, in Mason's, the question's dividable, it's dividable. If they're not dependent on each other, I don't know Roberts as well as I know Mason's, but in Mason's, if they're not dependent on each other, someone wants them to be asked in separate questions, they're asked, it doesn't take a second, it doesn't take a vote.
Would you like me to look it up?
No, like you handle it any way you please.
Well, I suppose I ought to look it up because I don't know. So I don't know if we need to vote on whether we want to separate the questions. So we can figure that out. Does anyone here know?
I know Mason's really well. I don't know Roberts at all.
Well,
Yeah,
we
I
are
think-
under Roberts,
I think
so
Mike is correct as to
separate
Mason's,
vote,
but
right to
I'm not
demand,
sure as to
173. Let's see, let's hope this actually tells us what we want.
Can I just say that
Mhm.
what rings in my mind, which I think I took to be a direct quote that Andrew was conveying, was the attorney said, or the attorneys said, I'm used to telling study committees no. I think that, and that gives me great pause, because at $200 an hour, who needs that?
Jen, can I respond?
Yep, go ahead, Allison.
So I took the comment of he's used to telling committees no. He will tell them no if it's not allowable in statute. He will tell them no if there's a problem with it. And I would expect he would probably explain why his no is applicable. And I see lawyers as lawyers. Sorry, but their job is the law. And I can't.
Some do it better than others.
Okay,
Some
so
do so, but I just can't. I just feel like it's getting way more complicated than it needs to be. I'm just beyond.
Feelings to give the chair discretion in finding us a lawyer.
So I want to just clarify procedurally that because if the pending main motion or amendment to it contains two or more parts capable of standing as separate questions, the Assembly can vote to treat each part individually in succession. Such a course is proposed by the motion for division of a question. So we have a motion for division of the question. It doesn't specify whether we second it, but it says that we need to vote about whether we are going to separate the questions. So I would like to take a vote on whether we're going to separate the question. So this is basically just whether we want to treat Allison's motion as two separate motions about Paul Gillis and about Chris Leopold. So all those in favor of separating the question, please raise your hand. Okay, we have 3 in favor. All those opposed? We have 4 opposed. All those abstaining? 3. So that's 3, 4, 3. Is that right?
3, 4, 3.
Okay, so the motion does not pass to separate the question, which means that we will continue to treat it as one question. Is there any further discussion about the question? Andrew?
I'm looking at the website for Tarrant, Gillis, and Richardson under their practice areas and education. There's nothing there specific to education, so I just have a concern that this late in the process, trying to find an attorney that we don't know is well-versed in the area of the law that we are focused on is deeply concerning to me.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we're going to, Mike?
I totally trust that if he is not versed and doesn't feel like he's capable of doing his job, then we should ask him whether he is.
That's the motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Great, so we're going to vote on the motion that's on the floor, which is to direct the chair to contact Paul Gillis to see if he is available for our time frame and project, and if not, to contract with Chris Leopold. All those in favor, please
Wait.
raise.
Oh, can I just ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to Pietro then?
He's not in the motion.
Oh,
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that should be counted as an 8, 0, 2, so the motion passes. We are nearing the end of the meeting. I know everyone wants to go. Are we interested in trying to have one of these lawyers at our meeting next week?
Yes, no, what did you say, Mike?
I said no. We're not ready. I'm sorry, we're not ready. And it'll be a waste of money if we do that. So I think we should get ready and then have the lawyer review the work.
Oh, we're supposed to shut the windows.
Right, I have that, I'm holding this
So we
right
have 3
here.
no's, we have a yes.
I don't know,
I don't think they have to be shut until we leave.
Okay, it looks like we're losing our quorum, so does
Yeah, I
anyone
move
wanna
for
make a motion to
adjournment.
adjourn? Steve moves to adjourn at, well, we haven't adjourned yet. Is there a second? Kate, all those in favor of adjourning?
Got me over here?
Anyone opposed?
What was the number?
Okay.
Approximately.